Anya, who spends her days helping her father in the corridors of a luxurious office, will have her life changed forever when she accidentally enters a meeting room filled with millionaires. While the millionaires make fun of her, they ask her to demonstrate her talents as a joke. Without hesitation, Anya begins to list the languages she can speak in French. Everyone is stunned, but one of the millionaires, remembering where she came from, rewards Anya with generous prizes and scholarships to help her further develop her talent. The question remains, will Anya rise to greater success, or will she fall behind and fade away? If you liked the video and have subscribed to my channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. The silence was a thick, oppressive blanket, muffling the distant hum of the city and the closer, more personal groan of the floor polisher. It was the kind of silence that settled deep into the bones, leaving a man alone with his thoughts. For Marcus, the night shift at Midas Company was a masterclass in solitude. The polished marble floors, the gleaming glass walls, the hushed offices of the executives who ran the world, they all felt like artifacts of another planet. A planet he visited every night but could never truly inhabit. He pushed the heavy, clunky machine, its rhythmic churn a low thrum against the stillness. The scent of industrial cleaner hung in the air, sharp and clinical, a stark contrast to the faint, lingering smell of expensive coffee and old paper that seeped from behind closed office doors. Marcus had been a janitor for Midas for 15 years. 15 years of a life lived in reverse. He woke when the city slept, worked when the executives were home with their families, and returned to his small two-bedroom apartment just as the sun was painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. His hands, calloused and rough from years of manual labor, guided the polisher with a practiced ease. Every scuff on the floor, every smudge on the glass, was a personal affront he took upon himself to vanquish. This was his kingdom, these empty, echoing halls. The fluorescent lights hummed a high-pitched tune overhead, illuminating his reflection in the pristine floor. A man in a worn-out uniform, shoulders stooped from a life of bending and lifting. His thoughts, however, were not stooped. They soared, light and free, across the city to his daughter, Anya. At 13, Anya was a universe of boundless energy and quiet intensity. She had her mother's eyes, deep, brown pools that held an entire galaxy of curiosity and wisdom. His wife, Sarah, had passed away 5 years ago, leaving a hole that only Anya's laughter could begin to fill. He remembered a conversation they had just that morning, a brief, hurried exchange as he was preparing to leave for work. "Papa, did you see the email from my teacher?" she had asked, her voice a rapid-fire string of excitement. "The one about the language competition? They're looking for students who are fluent in more than 2 languages." Marcus had paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Honey, you know I get those things on my phone when I have a break. Why are you so excited?" "Because I am, Papa. I'm going to participate. It's my chance to show what I can do." He had smiled, a tired, warm smile. "You always do, mi amor. You always do." He thought of Anya and a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling strong enough to push back the chill of the air conditioning. He often wondered where she got her brilliance. Sarah and he had always been simple people, hardworking but not intellectual. Anya, on the other hand, was a sponge, soaking up knowledge with an insatiable thirst. She had taught herself Spanish from YouTube videos, and then Italian from an old, dusty textbook she'd found at a thrift store. She would chatter away to him, her words a jumble of English and other tongues, her eyes sparkling with a joy that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. His back ached, a familiar, dull throb that had become a permanent part of his life. The physical work was relentless. But it was nothing compared to the emotional weight of his ambition for her. He wanted so much more for Anya. He didn't want her to know the grinding poverty that had defined his own life. He didn't want her to have to scrub floors and empty trash cans to make ends meet. He wanted her to be a leader, an innovator, a creator. He wanted her to have the opportunity to use her brilliant mind, to reach her full potential. The weight of Midas Company was a constant presence in his life. The executives, the ones who had their names on the polished doors and their pictures in the lobby, were a world away. He knew their names: Mr. Harrison, the CEO, a stern man with an icy gaze; Mr. Thompson, the CFO, who always had a laugh that was too loud and a smile that never reached his eyes; and the elusive Mr. Al-Saad, a Saudi millionaire who only came in for the big board meetings, his presence a whirlwind of expensive cologne and hushed reverence from the others. Marcus never saw them, not really. He saw the remnants of their day, the crumpled papers, the half-eaten sandwiches, the coffee mugs left on their desks. He was a ghost in their grand cathedral, a silent witness to their triumphs and their failures. He was a necessary part of the machine, but a part that remained unseen and unheard. He thought of the big meeting room on the top floor, a place he was strictly forbidden to enter. The inner sanctum, as his supervisor, a man named Mr. Jenkins, called it. It was where the real decisions were made, where millions of dollars changed hands with the stroke of a pen. Marcus had only ever glimpsed it from a distance. The large mahogany table, the plush leather chairs, the view of the city lights stretching out like a glittering endless sea. It was a place of power, a place he could never hope to enter. He finished polishing the last stretch of the main hallway and wheeled the machine back to the utility closet. The work was done for the night. As he wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, he thought of Anya. She would be asleep now, her head resting on a pillow, her dreams filled with words and numbers and colors he could only imagine. He had to keep pushing, keep working, keep sacrificing. His daughter's future was worth every ache in his back, every long, lonely night, every silent, humbling moment. Tomorrow was another day, another shift, another chance to ensure that Anya would not have to walk the same path. He locked the closet, the small click echoing in the immense silence of the building. And as he walked towards the exit, he felt a sense of purpose so strong it was almost a physical weight. He was Marcus, a janitor. But he was also Anya's father, and that was a role more important than any title in the entire Midas company. It was the only title that mattered. He just hoped it was enough. He made his way to the street, stepping out into the cool night air. The city was still alive, a symphony of horns and murmuring voices. He pulled out his phone, a worn-out model that had seen better days, and saw a text from Anya. "Hope you're having a good night, Papa. Miss you. Come home safe." A tired smile touched his lips as he began the long walk home, a man with a singular purpose in a world of endless wants and insatiable ambition. He was just a small cog in a giant machine, but for Anya he was the whole world. And that was all the motivation he needed. The next morning he would drop her off at school, making sure she had a warm breakfast and money for a decent lunch. He would do whatever it took, no matter the cost, to give her a better life. This company was a symbol of all he wanted for her, the opportunities that lay just out of reach. For a moment, he let himself imagine her in one of those offices, her name on the door. The thought was a sweet, painful dream, a dream he worked tirelessly to make a reality. He knew the road would be long and arduous, but with Anya at the end of it, he had all the motivation he needed to keep going. The jet hummed a low, almost imperceptible tune as it sliced through the clouds, a private symphony of titanium and filtered air. To most, this would be a moment of awe, the world spread out below like a rumpled blanket of cities and oceans. For Mr. Al-Sad, it was simply a Tuesday. He ran a gloved hand over the supple leather of his seat, a gesture born more of habit than appreciation. His world was not one of wonder, but of calculated moves, of assets and liabilities, of markets and mergers. His full name, Khalid bin Faisal Al-Sad, was a key that unlocked doors around the globe. He was a man of quiet authority, his power not announced with a shout, but with a gaze that could feel both intensely curious and utterly dismissive. At 58, his face was a tapestry of fine lines around his eyes, a roadmap of a life lived at a pace most could not comprehend. His dark suit, perfectly tailored, showed no hint of a wrinkle. His hair, a distinguished silver at the temples, gave him an aura of timeless wisdom. He was a force of nature, a mind that processed numbers and human behavior with equal frightening precision. He glanced across the cabin at his close associate, a man named Mr. Chin. Chin was the opposite of Khalid in every way. Where Khalid was serene and introspective, Chin was a whirlwind of energy, his hands always moving, his eyes darting from the screen of his laptop to the financial news scrolling on the cabin's large monitor. He was the kinetic energy to Khalid's potential, the one who executed the plans Khalid meticulously crafted. "The Midas Company file is complete, Khalid," Chin said, his voice a quick, sharp staccato. "The numbers are strong, the Q3 reports are solid. They're a prime target for a hostile takeover or at the very least, a majority stake. Our proposal is on the tablet. Everything is ready for the meeting." Khalid simply nodded, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. He was tired of numbers. He was tired of acquisitions. The thrill of the deal had long since faded, replaced by a sense of inevitability. The game was always the same: find a company, exploit its weakness, absorb its strength, and move on. The only variable was the name on the door. This time it was Midas. He knew Mr. Harrison, the CEO, would be a formidable opponent. A man with a cold, analytical mind and a ferocious pride in his company. Khalid had a certain respect for Harrison, the way a predator respects a worthy prey. But respect didn't change the outcome. He thought of his home in Riyadh, of the vibrant, sprawling city. He missed the smell of jasmine on the night air, the familiar sounds of his family. But his life was a cycle of private jets and hotel rooms, a gilded cage he had built for himself. He had a wife and 3 children, a family he adored, but they felt a world away, a beautiful picture he looked at on a screen. He remembered a conversation with his youngest daughter, Layla, just last week. "Baba," she had said, her voice small and sweet over the phone. "When are you coming home? You've been gone for so long." "Soon, Habibti," he had promised, the words feeling hollow even as he spoke them. "Just one more meeting." The guilt was a subtle, constant thrum beneath the surface of his calm demeanor. He had given his children everything money could buy, but he had often wondered if he had given them enough of himself. He had grown up in a family of modest means, and had seen firsthand the power of money to change a person's circumstances. He had spent his life chasing that power, and now that he had it in abundance, he felt a strange, nagging emptiness. He had conquered the world, but in doing so, had he lost a piece of his soul? The jet began its descent, the engine's low hum shifting to a deeper roar. New York City, a jewel box of concrete and light, spread out before them. Khalid watched it, his mind already running through the variables of the upcoming meeting. He knew the players, the pompous Mr. Thompson, the silent Mr. Harrison, the various board members who would whisper their allegiance to whoever had the most power. It was a dance he had performed 1,000 times. He knew every step, every beat. He had simply grown weary of the music. They landed at a private airfield, the limousine waiting for them on the tarmac. As he stepped out, the cool, crisp New York air was a welcome shock after the sterile atmosphere of the cabin. The city was a beast, alive and roaring, a symphony of a million different lives. He saw a flash of movement on the street below as they drove, a young boy with a soccer ball, laughing as he kicked it against a brick wall. A fleeting image, but it struck him with an odd pang of nostalgia. A simpler time, a simpler life. The car moved seamlessly through the traffic, the tinted windows shielding him from the curious stares of the people on the street. He was an observer, a man who saw the world from a distance. The limousine glided to a stop in front of a 5-star hotel, a fortress of steel and glass. As he stepped out, his security details surrounding him like a shield, he felt the weight of his purpose settle back on his shoulders. The Midas Company meeting. The hostile takeover. The next step in a game he was destined to win. He checked into his penthouse suite, a space so large and opulent it felt more like a museum than a home. He poured himself a glass of water, the ice clinking a delicate, lonely sound in the vast silence. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. He saw the Midas Company building in the distance, a tall, imposing structure that stood out even among the giants. He knew that somewhere in that building, a man named Marcus was probably pushing a floor polisher, a silent ghost in a world he could never truly enter. Khalid felt a strange kinship with this unseen person, a bond forged in the silent solitude of their work. One polished floors, the other polished deals. But both, he suspected, were driven by the same singular purpose, to provide a better life for their children. It was a thought that lingered in his mind as he prepared for the meeting, a small, quiet truth that cut through the noise and ambition of his life. He was a man of great power, but he was also a father. And in that one shared truth, lay a deeper understanding of the world, a connection that went beyond the balance sheets and the stock prices. He was a king in a world of his own making, but he was just a man, yearning for the simple, beautiful things that truly mattered. And he just hoped, as he prepared for the battle to come, that somewhere along the way he hadn't lost sight of them. The office of Mr. Harrison, perched on the 45th floor, was a fortress of glass and polished wood. But a fortress, he knew, was only as strong as its walls, and his were beginning to feel brittle. For 20 years he had lived and breathed Midas Company. He had started as a junior analyst, a hungry young man with a single-minded ambition to reach the top. He had worked his way up through the ranks, navigating the treacherous waters of corporate politics and market fluctuations, until he had finally claimed the corner office. Midas was not just a company to him. It was a testament to his life's work, a monument to his relentless drive. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a hand in his pocket, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city. He saw the world not as a collection of buildings and streets, but as a chessboard, and he had been playing the game for 2 decades. The past few weeks, however, had been a game he wasn't sure he could win. The whispers had started a month ago, a subtle hum on the financial wires about a powerful investor taking an interest in Midas. The whispers had become louder, more insistent, until they had finally coalesced into a name, Khalid Al-Saad. The name was a thunderclap in the financial world, a symbol of immense, almost limitless power. He was a man who did not play games, he simply won them. The weight of it all was a heavy, physical presence on his shoulders. The board was nervous, the shareholders were jittery, and his own reputation, the one he had meticulously built over 20 years, was hanging in the balance. He had a wife and 2 grown children, but even they seemed a distant memory in the maelstrom of his professional life. His wife, Julia, had tried to talk to him last night, her voice a soft, gentle current in the rushing river of his thoughts. "Robert," she had said, using the name she reserved for their most personal moments. "You need to rest. You look exhausted." He had just nodded, his eyes fixed on the financial news on the television. "I can't, Jules. Not until this is over." He felt the loneliness that comes with the top, a cold, isolated feeling that no amount of success could ever warm. The only person he could truly confide in was his CFO, Mr. Thompson. Thompson had been his right-hand man for 10 years, a boisterous, gregarious man with a laugh that echoed through the hallways. Thompson, Harrison knew, was more of a politician than a strategist. He was a master of the backslap and the charming smile, a man who could talk his way out of any situation. But Harrison trusted him. Or at least he had to. The door opened and Thompson strode in, his tie loosened, a confident, practiced grin on his face. "Bob," he said, using the nickname only he dared to use. "Looking out at your kingdom? Don't worry, man, we've got this." Harrison turned, his expression unreadable. "Khalid Al-Saad is a predator, Mark. He's not here to talk. He's here to take what he wants." Thompson chuckled, a deep, booming sound that felt out of place in the tense atmosphere. "And we're not going to let him. We've gone over the numbers 1,000 times. Our proposal is sound. We'll show him we're not a weak target. We're a rock." Harrison didn't share his confidence. He had seen the Al-Saad report, a detailed, ruthless analysis of Midas Company's every weakness. It was a masterpiece of corporate espionage, and it had left him feeling like a boxer who had been studied and dissected before he even stepped into the ring. "He's not interested in our numbers, Mark," Harrison said, his voice low and serious. "He's interested in our resolve. He wants to see if we'll fold. He wants to see if we're desperate." Thompson shrugged, a careless, almost dismissive gesture. "So we won't. We'll stand our ground. We'll show him that Midas is not for sale. Not to him. We have the board on our side. The shareholders will back us. He can't just come in here and take over the company." Harrison stared at him for a long moment, a flicker of doubt passing through his eyes. Thompson's confidence, he knew, was both his greatest strength and his most dangerous flaw. He was so sure of himself that he sometimes failed to see the warning signs. "He's not going to try and take us over, Mark," Harrison said, a chilling certainty in his voice. "Not yet. He'll come in with a smaller offer, a stake in the company. He'll offer a seat on the board. He'll try to buy his way in piece by piece. That's his game. He'll play the long game. And then he'll strike." Thompson's grin faltered, his eyes widening just a fraction. "Well, what do we do then?" "We don't give him an inch," Harrison said, his voice hardening with a resolve born of fear and desperation. "We refuse his offer. We tell him Midas Company is a family. We stand together or we fall alone. We show him we're not a company to be trifled with." The clock on the wall ticked on, each second a hammer blow against the silence. The pressure in the room was a tangible thing, a force that pressed in on them from all sides. The future of Midas, of their legacies, of everything they had built, all rested on their shoulders. "Right," Thompson said, his voice a little less confident now. "We'll do it. We'll stand our ground. We'll show him what Midas is made of." Harrison just nodded, his mind a whirlwind of numbers and strategies. He knew this was the biggest fight of his life, and he just hoped, with a raw, fierce intensity, that they were ready for it. The meeting was in 10 minutes. The fate of Midas Company hung in the balance. And as they walked out of the office and towards the great meeting room, the sound of their footsteps on the polished marble floor was the only sound in the entire building. They were two men standing at the precipice, about to face a force they could not possibly hope to defeat. They were two men about to go to war. He pulled at his collar, the starched fabric feeling like a noose around his neck. The weight of his legacy, of his ambition, of the lives that depended on him, was a crushing, unbearable burden. As they reached the elevator, he saw a cleaning cart in the distance, a small, insignificant thing in the vast, gleaming hallway. And for a fleeting moment, he wished he was that man pushing that cart, with a purpose as simple and as true as a clean floor. But he wasn't. He was a leader, a captain of industry. And he was about to face the biggest challenge of his life. The Midas Company's boardroom was a temple of power, a hushed sanctuary of high-stakes commerce. The air, thick with the scent of leather and ambition, felt heavy with the weight of expectation. Seated around the massive mahogany table, a piece of craftsmanship that felt as old and unmovable as the mountains, were the key players of the financial world. Mr. Harrison sat at the head, his face a grim mask of resolve. Mr. Thompson, his usual bravado muted, sat to his right, fidgeting with the edge of his tie. Across the table, a man who seemed to embody the very idea of power, sat Mr. Khalid Al-Saad. His posture was effortless, a study in quiet confidence. He listened, his head tilted slightly as Mr. Harrison laid out his pitch, a polished presentation of Midas Company's growth, its innovative strategies, its undeniable value. Khalid's gaze, however, was not on the screen. It was on Harrison, a silent, penetrating analysis of a man fighting for his life's work. The rest of the room was a microcosm of the corporate world. There was the wizened old money board member who had seen it all. There was the young, hungry analyst who hung on every word, his eyes wide with a desperate desire to impress. And then there was the silent, almost invisible figure of Mr. Chin, Khalid's right-hand man, his fingers a blur of motion as he typed notes on a tablet. The atmosphere was a tense, fragile thing. Harrison finished his presentation, the final slide hanging on the screen, a silent plea for recognition. A long, agonizing silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Khalid leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "A compelling presentation, Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice a low, melodic purr. "But it speaks of future potential, not present value. We've seen your Q3 numbers. They are solid, yes, but not extraordinary. My associates and I believe we can make them extraordinary." A flicker of a smile touched his lips, a cold, predatory gesture. "We're prepared to offer a significant stake in your company. A partnership. We can bring in new capital, new markets. The deal is on the tablet in front of you. A simple yes is all it takes." Thompson's eyes darted to Harrison, a look of desperate uncertainty in them. Harrison's expression, however, was as hard as granite. He had rehearsed this moment 100 times in his mind. He would not give in. He would not betray his company, his people, his legacy. "With all due respect, Mr. Al-Saad," Harrison began, his voice surprisingly steady, "we believe in the value we've built. We are not a company for sale. We are a family. We will not be giving up our control." Khalid's smile didn't waver. He simply stared at Harrison, a challenge in his eyes. It was a battle of wills, a silent, tense standoff. And then the spell was broken. A sudden, sharp sound cut through the silence, the rattle of a key, the soft groan of a heavy door. Every head in the room swiveled towards the sound. The door to the boardroom, a massive mahogany slab that was never meant to be opened from the outside, swung inward. Framed in the doorway was a young girl. She was 13, with deep, inquisitive eyes that took in the room in a single, sweeping glance. She had a mop in one hand and a bucket in the other, and she was wearing a worn-out t-shirt and jeans. It was Anya. She had been helping her father, who was still polishing the floor outside, and had been sent to grab a specific cleaning solution from the storage room. Unbeknownst to her, the meeting was still going on. She had been so focused on her task that she had not even heard the faint, muffled voices from inside. She was so focused that she had not even heard her father's frantic whisper, "Anya, stop," as she had put the key in the lock. She looked at the men in their expensive suits, their faces a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Her father's words echoed in her mind, "Never, ever go into the inner sanctum, mi amor." It is not for us. But she was already there. She froze, a deer caught in the headlights. The bucket in her hand seemed to grow impossibly heavy. Thompson was the first to speak. He let out a loud, booming laugh that felt more like a bark. Well, look what the cat dragged in. A new intern, Harrison? Or is this part of the entertainment? A few of the other men chuckled, a low, cruel sound that bounced off the glass walls. Anya's face flushed a deep, mortified red. She wanted nothing more than to disappear, to melt into the polished floor and vanish. She felt the weight of all their eyes on her, a humiliating, suffocating pressure. Harrison, mortified, stood up. I apologize, gentlemen. This is a mistake. She has no business being here. Please leave now, he said to Anya, his voice a low, controlled whisper of a man on the brink of a nervous breakdown. But before she could move, Thompson, a cruel smirk on his face, spoke again. Wait a minute, Harrison. Let's have a little fun. You want us to believe in the future of Midas? Maybe this is it. The future is a 13-year-old girl with a mop. Tell us, little girl, what are your talents? What can you do? His words, filled with a sneering mockery, stung Anya to her core. Her humiliation turned to a white-hot anger, a fierce, protective instinct that pushed aside her fear. They were making fun of her father, of everything she and her family stood for. In that moment, she was not a scared little girl. She was the daughter of a hard-working man who had sacrificed everything for her. She had a purpose, and it was to show them that she was more than what they saw. She lifted her head, her deep eyes meeting Thompson's smug, laughing ones. She took a deep breath, and then, without a single moment of hesitation, she began to speak. Her words were not in English. They were a rapid-fire string of a language that felt foreign and beautiful in the sterile, corporate room. Monsieur, je vous remercie de votre question. Mon père aimait toujours de que nous devons être fiers de nos capacités, même si les autres ne les comprennent pas. Je parle 6 langues, l'anglais, l'espagnol, le français, l'Italian, l'allemand et le chinois mandarin. The laughter in the room died a sudden, choked death. Thompson's grin fell from his face, replaced by a look of utter, blank confusion. He had no idea what she was saying. He could not understand a single word. He looked to the other men around the table, a plea for understanding in his eyes. But their faces were the same, a collection of confused, stunned expressions. Anya finished her statement, her voice firm and clear, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the millionaires who had so quickly, so cruelly dismissed her. But there was one face that was different. Mr. Al-Sad, who had remained silent throughout the whole humiliating exchange, stared at her with an expression of intense curiosity. His eyes, which had been so cold and distant, were now alive, filled with an awe she had not expected. He looked at her, not with amusement or disdain, but with a deep, personal interest. He saw a mind, not a janitor's daughter. He saw a person, not a symbol of mockery. He had heard the words she had spoken, and he understood them all. And for the first time in his life, Thompson was at a loss for words, his mouth agape. A thick, heavy silence fell over the room, a tangible weight that pressed down on every man present. It was a silence filled with stunned disbelief and the palpable sting of humiliation. Mr. Thompson, his face a mottled mix of red and white, looked as though he had been physically struck. His mouth, still agape from Anya's last word, struggled to form a coherent thought. His laughter, a moment ago so loud and condescending, now felt like a distant, embarrassing memory. The other board members, who had so readily joined in his mockery, now looked at each other with a kind of collective, bewildered shame. Anya stood in the doorway, her small frame radiating a fierce pride that seemed to fill the vast room. She had faced down their ridicule not with tears or pleas, but with a display of intellect that had left them all speechless. For a brief, glorious moment, she was not the janitor's daughter, not the intruder. She was the most powerful person in the room. Her father, who had been watching from the hallway, his heart in his throat, let out a slow, silent exhale of relief. He knew his daughter was special, but even he had not expected this. Then Mr. Thompson's sense of self-preservation kicked in. The initial shock gave way to a desperate need to reclaim his dominance. He could not let a 13-year-old girl, speaking in a foreign tongue he didn't understand, be the one to embarrass him. He straightened his tie with a jerky motion, a practiced grin, the kind of grin he used to dismiss a bad idea, stretching across his face. Well, isn't that charming, he said, his voice a strained parody of its usual booming self. "A little party trick. Very nice. But I believe we were discussing the future of this company, not a talent show. Now if you'll excuse us, we have very serious business to attend to. Go on, little girl, run along." His words, filled with a renewed, bitter mockery, were like a physical blow to Anya. The triumph she had felt just moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold, numbing hurt. He had not heard her message. He had only heard a sound he didn't understand, and he was dismissing it. Her carefully worded statement of pride and determination meant nothing to him. He was sending her back to the world she came from, the world he considered insignificant. Her head dropped and she gripped the handle of the mop tightly, her knuckles white. She turned to leave, her shoulders slumped with a fresh wave of humiliation. "Wait," a voice said. It was not Harrison. It was not Thompson. It was a quiet, unassuming man in the corner, a man who had barely spoken a word the entire meeting. His name was Mr. Rodriguez. He was an investor with a portfolio so diverse it defied easy categorization, a silent partner in countless ventures. His face, kind and thoughtful, was a stark contrast to the hard, calculating masks of the men around him. He spoke in a soft voice, but it had a clear, undeniable authority. "Mr. Thompson," he began, his Spanish accent making the words sound even more deliberate. "Intelligence is not a trick. It is a resource. A resource this company, and indeed this room, seems to be lacking at this moment. That little girl, she speaks 6 languages. 6. At 13. She understands determination. She understands hard work. These are not things to be mocked." Every eye in the room, including Khaled's, now turned to Mr. Rodriguez. Thompson, for the first time in his life, was truly silenced, his face a mask of furious, impotent rage. He was being publicly chastised by one of the most respected and mysterious investors in the world. Mr. Rodriguez rose from his seat. He walked to the head of the table, pulling a sleek, black card from his jacket pocket. He held it out, not to Thompson but to Harrison, who stared at it with a bewildered expression. "Give this to her father," Mr. Rodriguez said, his eyes still fixed on Anya, who was frozen in the doorway, her heart pounding with a mixture of confusion and hope. "I am interested in supporting her education, in investing in her future. This is not a conversation for a boardroom. This is a conversation for the future." He looked directly at Anya and offered her a warm, genuine smile. "My offer stands. The world needs minds like yours. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." He then turned back to his seat, a man who had made a declaration of immense generosity as if he were simply ordering a cup of coffee. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. It was no longer filled with humiliation, but with a breathtaking sense of shock and a subtle, shifting energy. Mr. Harrison, still reeling, took the card and looked at it, his mind scrambling to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. The man who was there to take his company had just been completely overshadowed by a compassionate gesture to a little girl. He looked at Khaled Al-Saad, who had been an impassive observer throughout the exchange. But now a slow, knowing smile spread across Khaled's lips. It was a smile that said, "This is not the game I came to play, but it is a much more interesting one." The hostile takeover, for now, was no longer the main event. A new story had just begun. The Midas Company's boardroom, a temple of polished marble and corporate power, emptied with a speed that defied its usual stately pace. The millionaires and executives, their faces a mixture of lingering shock and quiet contemplation, filed out one by one. Mr. Thompson, his face a mask of furious humiliation, stalked out of the room without a backward glance. Only Mr. Harrison and Khaled Al-Saad remained for a moment, their eyes meeting in a silent, meaningful exchange. Khaled's smile was still there, a subtle curve of the lips that held a deep, unspoken meaning. He had seen something far more valuable than a company's worth today. He had seen a true force of nature. He gave a slight nod to Harrison and then, with the same effortless grace with which he had entered, he was gone. Anya and her father, Marcus, stood in the hallway, 2 small, unassuming figures in the vast, gleaming emptiness. Anya's humiliation was a fading ache, replaced by a quiet awe at what had just transpired. Marcus, on the other hand, was rooted to the spot, a small black card clutched in his hand. It felt impossibly heavy, a small piece of cardboard carrying a weight of 1,000 dreams. He stared at it, at the raised silver lettering of Mr. Rodriguez's name, as if it were a fragile artifact from another world. He felt a hand on his arm and looked down at his daughter. Anya's eyes were wide, her face illuminated by a question he couldn't yet answer. "Papa," she said, her voice a soft, tremulous whisper. "What did I just do?" He knelt down, meeting her gaze. He gently placed a hand on her cheek, his calloused fingers a familiar comfort against her soft skin. "You," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "did everything. You showed them who we are." Anya's lips trembled. "But, he still mocked me." "Yes," Marcus said, his voice firming. "He did. Because he didn't understand. But one of them did." He held up the card. "He gave us this, Anya. He said he wants to help you. That he wants to invest in your future." Anya's eyes grew even wider. "Papa, what does that mean?" Marcus didn't have the answer yet. He only knew that for the first time in his life, a door had been opened, a door he had never even known existed. He had always been the one to provide, to protect, to sacrifice. But this was different. This was a chance for his daughter to escape the confines of their world, a chance for her to fly. Back at their small one-bedroom apartment, the card lay on the kitchen table, a small dark square against the worn laminate. It was a stark contrast to their home, a place of lived-in comfort and simple necessities. The air still smelled faintly of Marcus's cooking from last night's dinner, a delicious mix of rice and beans. The apartment was tidy, but every piece of furniture told a story of hard use. The coffee table had a faint, circular watermark from a spilled drink years ago, and the couch's cushions were permanently dented from years of nightly reading sessions between him and Anya. Anya, still buzzing with nervous energy, decided to translate for her father what she had said in the meeting. She spoke slowly, carefully, her words a quiet echo of the power she had just displayed. "I said, Sir, I thank you for your question. My father has always told me that we must be proud of our abilities, even if others do not understand them. I speak 6 languages: English, Spanish, French, Italian, German, and Mandarin Chinese. It is the result of determination and learning." Marcus listened, his eyes closed, the words of his daughter a balm to his soul. He had seen her studying late into the night, her face illuminated by the glow of a borrowed laptop. He had heard her humming to herself in Italian while doing the dishes and correcting his Spanish pronunciation with a gentle smile. He had known she was a beautiful, brilliant mind, but to hear her say it with such conviction, and to know that others had heard it too, filled him with a powerful, overwhelming pride. "Okay," he said, opening his eyes. He picked up the card, his hands trembling slightly. "It's time. I have to call." The phone felt heavy in his hand. He had a million questions. Was this a joke? A trap? A cruel kind of charity? But looking at Anya's face, her eyes filled with a hope so bright it felt like a physical thing, he knew he had to try. He dialed the number, his fingers shaking slightly. The phone rang once, twice, and then a crisp, professional voice answered. "The office of Mr. Rodriguez. How may I help you?" Marcus swallowed, his voice a low, nervous rumble. I am Marcus. I believe. Mr. Rodriguez gave me his card today." The voice on the other end softened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Marcus." "Yes. Mr. Rodriguez is expecting your call. Please hold for one moment." The pause was the longest moment of his life. He could feel Anya's breath on his arm, her small hand clutching his shirt. Then a new voice, just as crisp and professional, came on the line. "Mr. Rodriguez's assistant. He would like to meet with you and your daughter. Would tomorrow at 4 o'clock be a convenient time?" Marcus's mind reeled. "Tomorrow? So soon?" "Yes," he said, his voice stronger now. "Yes, that would be perfect." The assistant gave him the address. It was in a part of the city he had only seen from a distance, a place of gleaming skyscrapers and manicured parks, a world away from his humble apartment. They said their goodbyes and Marcus hung up the phone, his hand still clutched around it. He looked at Anya, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across his face. "We're going to meet him," he said, his voice filled with a wonder he hadn't felt since Anya was born. "Tomorrow. We're going to meet Mr. Rodriguez." The next day they wore their best. Anya in a simple but clean dress, her hair carefully braided. Marcus in his one good suit, which was a little frayed at the cuffs and a little too tight, but it was all he had. They took the bus and then the subway, watching the city shift and change around them, from the familiar grid of their neighborhood to the polished, alien gleam of the financial district. They stepped out of the subway station, the world around them a dazzling, intimidating display of wealth and power. They found the address. It was a sleek, minimalist building with a single, massive bronze sculpture in front. They walked inside, and a polite but distant receptionist directed them to the elevator. The doors opened with a soft chime, and as they stepped inside, Anya looked up at her father. He smiled back, a mixture of fear and immense pride in his eyes. The elevator car began to ascend, the numbers on the screen climbing higher and higher, taking them further and further away from everything they had ever known. The elevator ride was silent, a hushed descent into a world of incomprehensible wealth. Anya watched the numbers tick by on the digital display, 40, 41, 42, her stomach doing a slow, nervous flip with each floor. Marcus stood beside her, his hand gently on her shoulder. The faint scent of his aftershave, a simple, everyday scent of Old Spice, felt like a grounding anchor in the dizzying heights of the skyscraper. When the doors finally opened on the 55th floor, they were greeted not by a receptionist, but by an open space of quiet, breathtaking elegance. The floors were polished concrete, and the walls were a soft, natural wood. The furniture was minimalist and sculptural, each piece looking like an intentional work of art. The only sound was the gentle, rhythmic trickle of water from a small indoor Zen garden in the corner. It was a place of profound stillness, a stark contrast to the bustling, frantic energy of the streets below. Mr. Rodriguez was waiting for them. He stood by a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a sweeping, cinematic view of the city. He was dressed not in a suit like the men in the boardroom, but in a simple, perfectly tailored dark gray sweater and a pair of slacks. He was a man who seemed to wear his wealth with an unassuming ease, as if it were a second skin. He turned as they approached, a genuine, warm smile gracing his face. "Marcus," he said, his voice as calm and kind as it had been the day before. "And Anya, please come in. Have a seat." He gestured to two chairs facing his desk. The chairs themselves were works of art, molded from a single piece of dark wood with leather cushions. Anya and Marcus sat, their bodies still stiff with apprehension, while Mr. Rodriguez remained standing, his hands tucked into his pockets. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked at them, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I imagine you have many questions," he said at last. Marcus found his voice. "Sir, I don't know why you would do this." That was a moment of great embarrassment. "My daughter was in a place she was not supposed to be." Mr. Rodriguez shook his head slowly. "Mr. Marcus, a moment of embarrassment?" "I saw a moment of profound courage. A young woman, faced with ridicule from men who believe themselves to be masters of the universe, chose to respond not with anger or tears, but with a quiet display of her immense intelligence. That is not an embarrassment. That is something to be celebrated. It is something to be invested in." He walked to the window, his gaze sweeping over the city below. "I was not always a man with a view from the 55th floor. I grew up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to put food on our table. I learned to speak multiple languages not from expensive tutors, but from living in different neighborhoods and listening. I know what it means to be invisible to the world. I know what it means to have a talent that no one notices because they are too busy looking at your hands, not your mind." He turned back to Anya, his eyes gentle and understanding. "What you did yesterday, Anya, spoke to me on a level none of those financial projections could. You see, the other men in that room, they value things they can put on a spreadsheet. They value numbers and profits and capital. But I value what is truly rare. And what is truly rare is a mind like yours. A mind that has cultivated so much knowledge against all odds." He moved to his desk and picked up a single sheet of paper. He held it out to Marcus. "This is a scholarship. It's not a charity. It's an investment. It will cover your daughter's education from now until she has a degree from any university of her choosing, anywhere in the world. It will also include a living stipend for both of you so that you, Marcus, no longer have to work at Midas Company. You have dedicated your life to her, and now, it is time for you to have a life of your own." Marcus stood, the paper trembling in his hand. He stared at it, his mind unable to process the words he was reading. He looked at Anya, whose eyes were wide with a dawning comprehension of the gift she was being given. This wasn't just money, this was freedom. This was a chance for them both to breathe, to live without the constant weight of worry. "Mr. Rodriguez," Marcus said, his voice choked with emotion, I don't know what to say. We can't accept this." Mr. Rodriguez raised a hand. "You have to. It's not for you, Marcus. It's for the future. I'm not giving this to you as a gift. I'm giving this as an opportunity for the world. To ensure that a mind like Anya's does not go to waste so that she can go on and do great things. It is an investment in human potential. The best kind of investment there is." He then looked at Anya, a smile of quiet encouragement on his face. "Anya, I want you to start learning from a new tutor I have arranged for you. He will help you improve your languages and also to develop your skills in science. The world is yours for the taking. All you need to do is keep learning." Anya, who had been silent, her mind racing with 100 different thoughts and possibilities, finally spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but clear. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez." He just smiled. "The pleasure is all mine." An hour later they were back on the ground, standing on the same bustling street where they had just left. But the world looked different now. The cars still honked, the people still rushed, but the noise was no longer a frantic symphony. It was the sound of opportunity. The weight of their old life, a crushing daily burden, had been lifted. The future, which had always felt like a dim, uncertain horizon, was now a bright, vibrant, and attainable reality. They were no longer the janitor and his daughter. They were a scholar and her devoted father. They took the subway home, and as the car rumbled through the dark tunnels, Anya finally spoke. "Papa," she said, her voice filled with a quiet wonder, "we're going to be okay." Marcus looked at her, at the bright hope in her eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, he believed it was true. 5 years later, the same city skyline, once a distant and imposing wall of glass and steel, now looked familiar, almost friendly. It was a backdrop to a life that had been utterly transformed. Anya, now a poised and confident 18-year-old, stood on the rooftop terrace of a sleek, modern apartment building, her phone pressed to her ear. Below, the city buzzed with a different kind of energy, one she was now a part of. The air was crisp, and the sun, a warm, golden presence in the late afternoon, seemed to shine on a new world. "Yes, Papa, I've packed everything," she said, a smile in her voice. "The plane leaves at 8 tomorrow morning. Don't worry, I won't forget my passport." She listened, her smile widening. "Yes, I'll call you the moment I land. I love you too." She hung up, a sense of deep, abiding happiness settling over her. Her father, Marcus, was doing what he loved, tending to his garden and running a small, successful landscaping business. The years since Mr. Rodriguez's intervention had been a whirlwind of change, each day a new and exhilarating adventure. The scholarship had been a key that unlocked a universe of possibilities. Marcus had retired from his janitorial job at the Midas Company and with a living stipend, had been able to pursue his true passion. He had always had a magical touch with plants and now he had the time and resources to cultivate it. His business, Marcus's Green Thumb, was a testament to his talent, a quiet, flourishing success. Anya, meanwhile, had been a sponge, absorbing knowledge at a pace that astounded even her teachers. Mr. Rodriguez had kept his promise, and the tutor he provided, a brilliant and kind professor named Dr. Elena Vargas, had not only nurtured Anya's gift for languages but had also ignited a powerful passion for physics. Anya had found a beautiful symmetry in the universe, the same way she had in the structure of a new language. She excelled in both, her mind a bridge between the arts and the sciences. She graduated from high school with top honors, and her applications to universities across the country had all been accepted. The choice had been difficult, but ultimately she had chosen MIT, where she was set to begin her studies in computational linguistics and quantum physics. Her relationship with Mr. Rodriguez had evolved into a deep, genuine mentorship. He was more than a benefactor. He was a silent, watchful guide. He would call occasionally not to check on her progress, but to talk about life, about the challenges she faced, and about the importance of using her gifts for the good of the world. He had never once mentioned the money, the scholarship, or the sacrifice. He had simply invested in a person, and the return on that investment was something that could not be measured in dollars and cents. The Midas Company, the stage for her life's turning point, had ultimately undergone its own dramatic transformation. The hostile takeover by Khalid al-Saad had been successful. Mr. Thompson, who had so gleefully mocked Anya and her father, found himself ousted from the company he had so long dominated. His arrogance had been his undoing. He had underestimated not only Marcus and Anya, but also the sharp, calculating mind of Khalid. Mr. Harrison, the man who had shown a moment of quiet decency, was given an opportunity to lead a new humanitarian arm of the company, a project focused on investing in promising young talent from underserved communities. It was a fitting, ironic twist. The day before she was set to fly to Boston, Anya found herself looking at an old photo on her phone. It was a picture of her and her father taken years ago in their old apartment. Marcus was in his janitor's uniform, his hands still smudged with a day's work, but his smile was radiant. Anya was just a kid, her face bright with a simple joy that had nothing to do with money or status. She smiled at the memory, a quiet gratitude filling her heart. The old world was gone, replaced by a new one she had helped to build. But the foundation of that world, the core of who she was, remained unchanged. She was still Marcus's daughter, still the girl who had spent hours reading by the glow of a small lamp. She was still the girl who had been brave enough to speak in a language no one understood. The difference now was that she was going out into the world with a sense of purpose and a clear vision of her own power. She had learned that true wealth was not measured in the size of a bank account, but in the richness of a mind and the depth of a heart. She had seen men with unlimited resources fail to recognize the most valuable thing in the room. And she had seen a man with the quiet wisdom to see a true diamond in the rough. She had come from nothing and now she had everything, not in terms of material possessions, but in the endless potential of her own future. As she looked out over the city, she felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long, but it had led her to this moment. A moment where she stood at the precipice of her own greatness, ready to take the next step, ready to change the world. She thought of her father, of his love and sacrifice, and of the man who had believed in her when no one else would. She felt a new purpose stirring within her, to one day be a person who could, in a moment of quiet grace, change another person's life forever. And with that thought, she turned from the window and began to write her first speech in Mandarin Chinese, on the subject of quantum entanglement. Dear viewer, if you've watched up to this point, thank you for your support. I have a small request. If you enjoy my stories, you can subscribe to the channel, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts about the stories in the comments. Enjoy watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.